Last week we discovered that since the landmark Paris Climate Agreement back in 2015, not only has the world so far failed to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, but we actually managed to increase output by 1.6% in 2017 and another 2.7% last year to an all-time high of 37 billion tonnes. Here's another couple of factoids for you. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was set up just over 30 years ago to help governments and societies make the right decisions to ensure a reduction in CO2 levels. And in that 30 years, which seems like a blink of an eye to me, the human race has spewed out more than half of all the carbon dioxide that's ever been emitted by the entire human race since modern humans walked out of Africa about 100,000 years ago, in the space of 3 decades. And you don't need me to tell you that one of the biggest culprits is the fossil fuel industry. You probably don't need me to tell you that the PR machines of that industry have been denying, obfuscating and generally covering up what they have known to be scientific fact for well over 50 years. But despite running an incredibly sophisticated lying propaganda machine and operating a blatant oil cartel in plain sight, the organisation we know as OPEC, to make sure they rinse all of us of as much of our hard-earned cash as possible, in recent years, the fossil fuel companies have been pretty consistently outspending their revenues as they continue their relentless, irrational and obsessive quest for more and more elusive reserves. So why haven't they run out of cash and gone bankrupt, leaving the way clear for renewable technologies to take over, as they surely are going to do anyway? Well, maybe it'll help if we go back one more time to the Paris Climate Accord in 2015, because since that historic, world-changing, landmark geopolitical achievement barely 4 years ago, the world's top banks have poured another $1.9 trillion into fossil fuel companies worldwide. So, can our banks kick their addiction to oil and gas before it's too late? Hello and welcome to Just Have a Think. For about 30 years or so I banked with HSBC, one of the world's oldest banks. But then a couple of years ago, when I started digging into the causes of our climate breakdown to prepare for starting this channel, I discovered that just between 2016 and 2018 HSBC had invested nearly $60 billion into coal, oil, tar sands and Arctic and deep water drilling. And it dawned on me that some of that investment money was my money, my salary going into HSBC's coffers every month, just like the salaries of millions and millions of other people. And HSBC weren't leaving my money in my bank account because that's not what banks do. They use it to make investments. And the investments HSBC were making were directly contributing to the acceleration of our climate breakdown. So I switched banks to one that doesn't do that. Quite straightforward. The bank I chose to move to is called Triodos. It's not difficult to find out if your bank invests in fossil fuels. In fact, the answer is almost certainly yes, unless you've made a concerted effort to really avoid them. Every single one of the top banks in the world are extremely heavily invested in the fossil fuel industry. JP Morgan Chase are the world's worst offenders. Between 2016 and 2018, they pumped almost $200 billion of hard-working people's money into fossil fuels. You can find this list for yourself at a website called Banktrack. Every year they produce a fossil fuel finance report card, and these figures are taken from the 2019 report. They check out almost all polluting forms of fossil fuel production worldwide and tell you exactly which banks are most heavily invested in those areas. A fun game for all the family to play is reading the fluffy PR flannel at the websites of these big banks and then juxtaposing that against what they're actually doing behind your back. Not only will your kids pick up a new Ponzi word, juxtapose, but they might also hopefully learn just what a duplicitous and disingenuous group of people currently run global finance. So what makes my new bank Triodos any different? Well, let's find out from this guy. He's called Kees Vendrick. He's the chief economist at Triodos, and he believes it is precisely because banks have such a significant global impact that they also have a major opportunity to help decarbonise the economies of our planet and advance sustainable development. In fact, he's on a mission to build and strengthen a global consortium of alternative financial institutions who ensure all of their customers' cash is divested out of fossil fuels and into renewable technologies and other environmentally responsible projects. In 2018 alone, Triodos financed about $800 million worth of clean energy projects that prevented the equivalent of over 985 million tonnes of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. And I think that's not bad. And they're a bank that actually responded rationally to the challenges set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement. During that same year, they joined with other pioneering Dutch financial institutions to form the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials, or PCAF. The group signed a Dutch carbon pledge, committing its participants to create a standardised way to capture accurate information highlighting the genuine carbon footprints of financial institutions, and not just the direct carbon footprints of the organisations themselves, but a proper, honest assessment of the much larger indirect carbon footprint associated with the loans and investments that they make. The PCAF methodology was published in 2017, and Triodos started reporting using this approach in their 2018 annual report. And if you're thinking, oh yeah, well, it's all very well for the Dutch to have a fancy green banking institution in a flat country where they all wear clogs and ride bicycles and base their economy on growing plants, half of which they smoke anyway, and this sort of lily-livered liberal utopian idealism would be impossible to replicate anywhere else in the industrial world, well, you're wrong, because there's already a global institution doing exactly that. They're called the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, and they've been advancing positive change in the banking sector since 2009. If you've never heard of them, then you're certainly not alone. The mainstream banks are not members of this alliance, and I can't imagine they've made much of an effort to mention the GABV to their own customers. But take a look at the global map at the GABV website. They have member institutions all over the world, albeit with the somewhat conspicuous absence of the BRIC countries of Brazil, Russia, India and China. Nevertheless, you can go and check out each one of them for yourself, whether you want the reassurance of financial stability by looking through their performance numbers, or you just want to understand exactly what environmental projects they've been investing people's money in. You can just click in and find out. In a recent article, Kees Vendrick outlined how back in February of this year, 28 GABV members representing $150 billion in assets, led by Triodos Bank and the US institution Amalgamated Bank, pledged to assess and disclose their greenhouse gas emissions within 3 years, bringing carbon accounting firmly into the mainstream. And he goes on to point out that in July of this year, over 50 financial institutions in the Netherlands officially committed themselves to the goals of the Dutch Climate Agreement, pledging to take measures to reduce CO2 emissions by 49% by 2030. Quite what they felt was wrong with 50%, or frankly maybe 100%, I'm not quite sure, but Vendrick says the GABV are pushing these institutions to start disclosing the carbon footprint of their combined 3,000 billion euros of funds under management by 2020, using the principles outlined in the Partnership for Carbon Accounting Financials. He concludes by stressing that carbon accounting is a vital foundation for progress. In fact, it may well run hand in hand with carbon pricing and taxation as we move through the 21st century. Like everything else though that responsible, environmentally conscious organisations are attempting right now to try to mitigate the worst effects of our climate emergency, carbon accounting can't provide a complete solution to the challenge, but it could set new standards for banking that will be a key element in the sector's efforts to play its part in addressing the emergency that faces all of us. There should be no dark or light green banking, says Vendrick. There should just be green banking, and it should be the norm. Now, at this point in the video, it is of course crucial that I point out that I am not a financial advisor, and therefore I cannot advise you on how to spend or invest your money, or point out that switching to a green bank may very well be the easiest and most impactful climate mitigation move you could make this year. And because I'm not a financial advisor, it would be entirely inappropriate for me to strongly suggest that you immediately look into moving your monthly paycheck into Amalgamated Bank in America, or Clearwater Credit Union in Canada, Triodos or Cooperative Bank in the UK, or Teachers Mutual in Australia, or whichever GABV member bank operates in your country. And the fact that I've left a comprehensive list of direct links categorised by country to the join-up pages of every single GABV bank in the comments section below, allowing you to seamlessly start the process of moving your money away from fossil fuels as soon as this video ends, in no way constitutes any kind of endorsement of any particular bank or any kind of future financial planning strategy that you may wish to engage in. No, that would be wholly wrong of me, and I am therefore not going to do that. Good, right, well I think we've cleared that up, but there is quite a strong clue as to my point of view in the title of this channel, so, you know, that's it for this week. If ever there was a week though that I would really ask you to share one of our videos, I think it would definitely be this week. Imagine a world where everyone switched their banking to green banks and the infinite money stream that the fossil fuel industry has enjoyed for so many decades finally ran dry. So click on that like and share button and spread the word. And if you want to support what we're doing here at the channel, you can show that support by clicking on that icon there and subscribing, which is completely free to do, of course, but it really does make a big difference to how well the YouTube algorithms find our content. As always, thanks very much for watching, have a great week, and remember to just have a think. See you next week.